I'm here with Betty J. Williams, one of the WASPs in World War II. What was it like to fly the planes in World War II, Betty?
Fabulous, 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 fabulous. You know, I have to tell you a cute little story. After I won my wings, you have no idea where you were going to be sent, you know, and they told me to Randolph Field. Well, I don't know anything about Randolph Field, you know, but was I ever lucky. It's the most beautiful field, I think, in the United States. We started with the commanding general, and he said, well, there's one other gal and myself. He said, well, there's no room for you here. No room for you here. So, well, where are we going to stay? He said, well, I don't know. So that was our dilemma. I mean, we started at 8 o'clock in the morning with the commanding general of the whole base, and by 3 or 4, we were down to a captain, and that's when we found out what we were going to be doing. We were going to be test pilots, and I thought that's wonderful. We could, you know, more learning. I was always wanting to learn. But the problem was that we had no place to stay. And we grabbed a newspaper and we read there was a room for rent over the railroad tracks as you go out of the field. And it was a screened-in porch. And that was where we were staying. It was ridiculous. We didn't have a car. We had to walk in. And I finally one morning at 3 o'clock, I said, we deserve better than this. This is ridiculous. I said, we're getting something better than this. So we found an ad in the newspaper, and we were staying in a lovely place up in Breckenridge Park. And that was paradise. I mean, there was a beautiful room that had 12 windows that looked out on a garden. And the first night we were there, and the next day was Sunday, and the gentleman knocked on the door, and he said, if you're decent, open up. And he had a whole tray full of daiquiris. He said, come on out and have breakfast with us. Well, that turned out fine, except that we had to change our clothes. We dress uniform. We had to walk down to get on a bus. And when we got to the base, we'd get out of our dress uniforms and get into our flying togs. And because Randolph was considered the West Point of the air, all of the dignitaries were always coming in there. So we'd have to get out of our flying clothes and get into our dress uniform to go over to have lunch, and then repeat the whole process. So that went on for quite a while, and Cochran came in. She said, well, I want to talk to both of you. She said, I don't know why we have trouble keeping people on this base. Tell me, where are you staying? And we said, well, Miss Cochran, they told us there was no room on the base. And I said, we've been renting a room up in Breckenridge Park. She said, I'll take care of that. In 40 minutes, there was a great big building with all kinds of cots in it. And I enjoyed Randolph very much. But when they wanted me to go to B-25 school, and I said, do I have anything to say about this? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I don't want to go to a B-25 school. And they said, why not? And I said, well, I used to work for the airlines. And I said, it's going to be a long time before they let women fly. You know, I said, I want to fly that P-40. They said, get in line. A lot of generals ahead of you. I said, so what do I do to get in line? And they said, but you got to pass the blindfold test. I said, all right. So I said to the other gal, Petey, come on, this is going to be fun. So what we would do in our lunch period, we would go over in the hangar and sit in the hangar, because what we had to do for the blindfold test, we had to put our hand and finger on every knob, tab, and lever and name it. I think I missed 2 circuit breakers or something like that. And they said, well, you're all set. And I said, that's it? They said, yeah, that's it. Because it was a single cockpit, you know. And it was a P-40N, which meant it was an electric prop. And I didn't like that because they didn't want it to overheat. And the minute you'd get into position to take off, they stopped all traffic on the field. So every eye was on you, you know, because they didn't want the aircraft to heat up. So he said to Petey, you take one, and Betty, you take one. And he put a little pad on our knee and said, that's what you're supposed to do. And he said, I'm going to be in another plane, so So we went up and we did everything, and we came down, and he said, don't land on the runway. We don't let the P-40s land on the runway. He said, some of the guys get too reckless, you know. So I want you to land on the grass. I said, okay, land on the grass. That was the checkout. The next day they called, they said, we got a P-40 over here we want tested. Now which one of you gals are going to do it? And Petey said, I'm not going to do it. She'd been a kindergarten teacher, So I said, okay, I'll do it. So the only trouble with that is that when I went over, Randolph Field is such a huge field. It's two fields. If you're on one side, you can't taxi over. You have to take off, land over on the other side. It's that large. So when I went over there, they didn't have the aircraft quite ready. And it started getting dark, and I thought, what are we doing with this? They said, well, we just want you to slow time it. That means they put a new engine in, and all you do is slow time the aircraft. It's getting dark, and I thought, oh my God, I had to stay up for an hour. So I finally got off, and I'm upstairs, and I'm looking down, and the lights are coming on. It's getting dark, and I thought, uh-oh. Well, second time I ever land this airplane's going to be at night. Oh. Brand new airplane, a P-40. Anyway, I got it down. And the next day over at the officers club, this guy says to me, well, you're a pretty hot pilot, you are. And I said, how's that, sir? He said, we don't even let our guys fly those things. I said, well, sir, I was upstairs. I thought I was going to get down. So he left me alone. But I loved Randolph very much. When we first went there, the gentleman was a major that was the head of emergency engineering, and he wouldn't let us fly. He said, I don't think they can't fly. You know, fly. And we're sitting out with our backs up against it, and we're right underneath his big window, and there was a captain in there, and the major's looking out the window, and he sees this guy bouncing all over the runway, and he's screaming at the captain, who in the H is in that airplane? It's one of the guys that just came back from overseas. Well, he was probably flying something big, and all of a sudden he's back in a T6. So the major says, well, how are we going to get all those airplanes tested? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And the captain says, why don't you let the WASP fly? He says, hey, you don't think. The captain says, that's one way to find out. He came out and he said to us, hey, girls, let you go flying? Yes, sir. Says, you take one and you take one, and they're both standing there looking, boy, we just greased it on.
Well, what was it like today to see your sister WASPs?
Well, we have a terrific bond. We stay together. I'm a past national president, and I've been very active. I was the fourth WASP to put this whole organization together, and we've been very active for over 60 years. We're winding up our organization now because we're all in our 80s and 90s. And it's the closest relationship I've ever had with a group of people. Because we all experience, and we go together and we tell stories, and we still have surprises. It was tremendous. And I don't think any gal who'd been a WASP can say it didn't change her life, because it did.